This witch of an HOA Karen is the worst I've seen. I, 34 male, and my wife, 31 female, have 2 kids, 3 and 1. We liked most of our neighbors, except Karen. She was always jealous and hateful to us, and it all came to a head with a huge surprise for us. So we live in a beautiful cul-de-sac where my family and I just moved into an amazing house with a huge backyard for the kids and to mow. We were thrilled to have such a large outdoor space, and I couldn't wait to turn it into a lush garden paradise, even though my gardening skills actually blow. The best part was that we actually got into a great neighborhood without being in their stupid HOA. Karen, however, lived right next door to us and was always keenly aware of every detail in our lives. It didn't take her long to notice that we weren't using a large part of our yard. While we did maintain it with a neatly trimmed lawn and occasional picnics, we had no immediate plans to build a garage or a shed on the unused portion. This, my friends, was the perfect storm for Karen's jealousy. You see, Karen had a small lawn of her own, barely big enough for a picnic blanket or two, and she could not stand the idea that we had this vast unutilized space. So she hatched a scheme to take matters into her own hands while we were on vacation for 2 weeks. So we locked up our house and said, "See you later," to our lovely neighborhood, and had no idea of the impending chaos that was HOA Karen greeting us upon our return. 2 weeks later, we returned home. The minute we pulled into our driveway, our jaws dropped to the ground. There stood a massive in-ground swimming pool, complete with a little diving board and slide on the side too. What in the world? I tried to control my outburst in front of my kids, but man, it's so hard to do sometimes, especially in a time like this and against a woman like her. We most certainly had not ordered a pool, nor did we have any plans to do so. As we approached, we found a letter wedged in our front door. I picked it up and my hands were shaking as I read it. It was a construction permit from the city, issued to none other than HOA Karen, allowing her to build a pool on our property. Insane. We could not believe our eyes. Karen, that dumb neighbor, had taken advantage of our vacation to construct a pool right in our own backyard. We scrambled inside with rage and began searching the house for any clues. Our first thought was that perhaps it was a well-intentioned surprise from like a close friend or a family member. But as we investigated further, we found the truth. So we were out of options, and we're just still trying to wrap our heads around this ridiculous situation, and we decided to check our home security cameras. We scrolled through the footage, and that's when we hit the jackpot, baby. There, in all of her glory, was Karen herself, supervising the construction crew as they installed the pool, all while smirking like that she thought she owned the place. We couldn't believe our luck, or should I say, her bad judgment. With evidence in hand, we took the next logical step. We contacted the HOA president and our lawyer. The conversation was nothing short of a roller coaster. The HOA president was as shocked as we were. He assured us that Karen had never received any approval for such a project, even from the HOA. I mean, we never got along with the idea of an HOA, and we weren't subjected to their regulations or fees, so where did all this crap come from? Our lawyer, on the other hand, was quite amused by the case, seeing it as an opportunity to give Karen a taste of her own medicine. With the evidence from our security cameras and construction permit, we had a strong case against her. He suggested that we gather estimates for the removal of the pool and any potential damage that it had caused on our property, and that we should also keep a record of any other related expenses. So then we submitted the evidence to the HOA president, who promptly called an emergency meeting with the association board. It didn't take long for them to come to a unanimous decision. Karen was in deep trouble, almost as deep as the pool that she thought she could get away with. HOA president paid us a visit to inform us of their decision. Karen was fined a substantial amount for her unauthorized construction project, which would help cover the cost of removing the pool. Additionally, she was ordered to compensate us for any damage that her pool had caused to our property. It was a sweet victory for us and a bitter pill for Karen to swallow. With the legal process started, we embarked on the tough task of removing the pool. The construction crew, who didn't realize they were accomplices in Karen's idiotic plan, arrived and began the process of dismantling what was now a giant eyesore in our backyard. We watched with a mixture of satisfaction and relief as the once beautiful monstrosity came crashing down piece by piece. HOA Karen's little project had cost her dearly, not just in terms of the fines and the money that she had to pay us, but also in her reputation. Her attempt to seize our property had backfired awesomely. At least she knows not to try and pull that crap again. HOA documents were hastily drafted by an attorney with an AOL email address, while the building was hastily converted from apartments to condos during the 2006 and 7 housing bubble, so you know the documents are bulletproof. We have 6 owner-occupants and 6 rental units, with 4 of the landlords living outside of the city and 2 of the landlords living outside of the state. Our treasurer contracts cleaning and gardening to herself and reimburses herself for her cleaning services by transferring money from the HOA account to her personal account, and nobody says or does anything about it. No tax returns, no 1099s, nothing. Conflict of interest at best, embezzlement at worst. She interprets the documents however it's convenient for her, and you can quote her directly back to herself and she will backpedal. Enough backstory. Our board is willing to spend $2 grand on an amendment to ban cannabis and tobacco smoking before legalization takes effect on August 1st, and has been using some pretty shady techniques for the amendment and the vote, but they are not willing to spend $1,800 to mitigate radon on the garden level, which is the equivalent of 12 cigarettes a day. The building has always been non-smoking from the very beginning, even though it's never been in the documents. Are there good carcinogens and bad carcinogens? One of the absentee landlords on the board responded to the above question with, "As an HOA, I think that everyone should assume positive intent by other owners. We are all volunteers and we all have a lot going on in our lives. If you want your dues to go up substantially, we can hire someone to manage the HOA. Do you really think a company will care about what is happening in a small 12-unit building? Gaslighting, yay! Do people with positive intent usually have to ask you to assume positive intent? Certainly, being a volunteer with a very busy life excuses lack of response to building maintenance, lawn care, snow removal, and so on. I'm sure the LLC that our secretary owns for her rental unit is very concerned about what is happening in a small 12-unit building. Perhaps she would feel more comfortable if she kept to her suburban McMansion 30 miles away and left the management of the building to us poors. What is the appropriate level of shade and trolling for my response? I wasn't even going to attend the meeting so they wouldn't have a quorum, until they sent a reminder that if you didn't have a proxy, the board would be your proxy. I also got them to postpone the vote until after August 1st, because one of my garden level peers, a medical MJ patient, is pending sale. The least they can do is allow the new owner to have a voice, right? I am thinking about voting present so that they meet their quorum, but one less vote towards a majority. HOA assistance and advice, posted by JoeSal35. I need some assistance and advice with my HOA. My wife and I live in a condo and townhome community in New Jersey. In late June of this year, I decided to replace my kitchen faucet as a phase of one of several home improvement projects. After watching several kitchen faucet replacement videos, I decided to call a plumber. When the plumbers arrived, they realized that the shutoff valve into the unit was broken. They stated that they're able to fix it, but first we would need permission from the HOA and their maintenance would have to shut off the valve into the entire building, thus turning off everyone else's water. Basically, I'm responsible for everything inside the unit and the HOA is responsible for the outside. So I conveyed this to the HOA and they decided to send out the maintenance man to look for our unit's shutoff valve, as they did not believe that the plumbers knew where it was. After 20 minutes, the maintenance man agreed that the shutoff valve that the plumbers identified is, in fact, the shutoff valve. We then agreed with the HOA management that we would shut off the water into the building for the plumbers to do the work. I arranged for a time for the plumbers to come back at 9 a.m. the next day with the HOA's permission. The HOA stated that the maintenance man would be there to help. When the next day rolled around, the maintenance man came in at 7:30 a.m., tried to shut off the unit's shutoff valve, and left for a doctor's appointment after saying the plumber can work with the small amount of water trickle coming through the kitchen faucet. Needless to say, the plumbers disagreed. Maintenance workers from other units had to come and help the plumbers, but they realized that the shutoff valve into the building was also broken. The plumbers had to leave after 2 hours, to which I had to pay their appearance rate. After more back and forth with the HOA, they decided that a special plumber needed to fix the building's shutoff valve. It is now late July, and the HOA stated that there is no diagram of the development's pipe layout and that they do not know where the building's shutoff valve is. The excuse that they gave me is that there were several different developers who built the different buildings, and they lost the diagrams along the way. I can't move on with my home improvement projects until this is fixed, and I'm also concerned that if a water emergency were to happen in either my unit or my neighbors, we'd be in big trouble. Also, I don't think it's acceptable for them to not know where the unit's pipes are. The master deed states that they are to maintain the water system. Although they're attempting to fix it now, it does not seem that they've done so previously, and their ineptitude is costing us money. Does anyone have any advice? Is a lawsuit possible? This commenter says that he's kind of screwed, needs to keep pushing the HOA and get a lawyer, and then talks about getting a good plumber if the HOA can't do it. Entitled coworker got herself fired, posted by Dragon Crystal. Backstory: I never personally worked with this Karen, but I'd seen her chatting with everyone in our department on the workplace chat group made by the department manager. It reached the point where she just refused to work unless it was under her terms and made up excuses on why she couldn't work her assigned shifts. I'm just going to list off a few things that I recall seeing on work chat, a bit of my short experience with her, and then I'll mention what I was told by coworkers and what leads up to when she was eventually let go due to refusing to work her shifts and whatnot. So there's going to be me, Karen, and a few coworkers: Bella, Derry, Zelda, a manager, and Jane, another manager. Karen said, "Hey, anyone want Thursday off? I can take your shift and you can get the day off instead." Coworker said, "Sure, you can take my 11 to 5 shift." Actually, I meant night shift," Karen replied. "Oh, okay, that's fine, but I'm still leaving it open for grabs because I've got things to do and I can't make it." "Karen, you can take my 5 to 11 p.m. shift because I have to open the following day," another coworker said. Karen replied, "I can't work later than 10 p.m. I need my sleep and I live very far from here." Now, as a note, I didn't respond because I was at work and I was only able to take a quick glimpse at my phone. Also, I only work mornings, so I usually don't respond to picking up night shifts, and I only respond to shifts that I know I can pick up or if I'm messaged personally by a fellow coworker. Several days later, Karen says, "Hey, can anyone pick up my night shift? I'm not feeling well and I've been feeling off all of these days." Nobody responded because we were all busy or dealing with other things at the moment. Was told a few days later she never showed up to her shift that day or called out. Days later, Karen says again, "Does anyone want my morning shift for their night shift? I'm not a morning person and I really need my sleep. Hey, hello? Does anyone want my morning shift? It's from 11 to 5. 5 minutes goes by with no response, and I've seen her message, but it was in the middle of rush hour and I had a rush of drinks to make. Also, that shift was technically a mid-shift, not even morning shift anymore. I know because I'm scheduled that shift several times." Karen says, "Wow, so that's how it's gonna be. If nobody wanted my shift, then just say it. Don't ignore me like that. That's rude." She unsends the message before saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't type that. It was my sister who wrote that last part." Sure, Karen. Now comes my short experience with her. On the first day, she was supposed to be my night replacement along with Bella, the other coworker. It was a bit busy, so I stayed a few minutes behind to help Bella catch up on drink orders before noticing that Karen has yet to show up. So I went to Zelda, the manager, and I told her, "Hey, Karen hasn't shown up yet and it's past my out time. Did you want me to stay and wait or I can head out?" Manager says, "Give me 2 minutes and I'll give Karen a call." Now, I'm not worried about it, so I agreed and I went back to helping Bella again. It's about 15 minutes after my shift and Bella is all caught up with the drinks and told me that I can head out until Karen arrives, so I approach Zelda, the manager, to see Karen's status. Manager says, "So I called Karen and she's currently stuck in traffic. If Bella is all caught up with drinks, you can head out." So I confirm that I just helped Bella get caught up with everything and the manager gives me the okay to leave for the day. Day 2, Karen again pulls the same thing, claiming she was again going to be late due to being stuck in traffic. Luckily, that day was a very, very slow day, and I was allowed to leave on time as soon as Bella arrived to replace me. Now is when she was fired. Jerry, another coworker of mine, told me after I found out that Karen was fired that she'd never actually want to run any drinks except one or two the entire shift and would always be on her phone or wandering off somewhere to hide until managers intervened to get her back to work. Then she'd refuse to assist with bringing dirty dishes down to be washed and make everyone else do it instead, as well as fake to not being feeling well right after clocking in for work and then getting sent home, as well as picking up shifts and then just not showing up to them, or claiming I overslept and didn't hear my alarm, or I misread my schedule and thought I was working tomorrow, while again pulling another no-call no-show. Management had enough and fired her along with several other people too. One whom I'll mention was caught sleeping on the job and smugly said to a fellow coworker, "You owe me for making me have to bring these dishes downstairs to be washed," when she and several other people were having upset stomachs due to something they ate for lunch that evening. She didn't owe him anything. He was sleeping on the job and she was doing all the work. She was perfectly fine after a few hours and still works there. I don't know how this Karen lasted as long as she did. You'd think she'd be axed way before this point. Shady landlord loses his fancy truck and just about everything else. Posted by Zarina Blue. My ex-husband and I have always gotten along very well, and we have, at the time of the story, 7 years old, a daughter. We have always lived near each other for convenience sake, and have, on occasion, even lived in the same house after divorcing. So I was thrilled when the people across the street from him sold their place, and apparently it was going to be for rent. I had known the folks across the street, nice people, and had even been in the house a time or two, so when I showed up with my other half to look the place over, I kinda knew what we'd be getting. The landlord was working on the house when we pulled up. We had gone out to eat before this, and so I know he was unaware that he was talking to someone who knew the people who had lived there and been in the house. His big old dually was in the drive with his company name stenciled on it. He meets us in the garage and immediately starts lying. He told me this was his family home and he was fixing it up, but there were a lot of memories there and his kids had grown up in that house. I realized that he was adding value. I kept my mouth shut because it was right across the street from my ex-husband and it was literally the bus stop for the school for my daughter. He continued to lie and I kinda tuned him out. The place was a little worse for wear and dirty, gross carpet and chipped paint. I made a comment on the broken light switch and he told me he was having a cleaning crew come through and clean up the place and have everything painted and the carpet redone. The price was a little high, but once again I really wanted it, and it wasn't nightmare high, just $200 over what I was expecting. I had a small Australian Shepherd, so first month's rent, last month's rent, and pet deposit. $1,250 for each one. Ouch. So about 2 weeks later, it was move-in day. I should have known something was up when the key was left in a combo box on the door. We had paid through a service, so he had the money, and we had the key, and a mess. He had done literally nothing except replace a set of rotted outdoor steps that he probably had to for liability purposes. We dragged out the digital camera and started taking pictures. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a partial basement. We took over 1,100 pictures. Here are some highlights. Ketchup was smeared on the kitchen walls and floor and nothing in there had been clean. The fridge was awful. Had what smelled like hair gel rubbed into it in the dining room and outside the front bathroom door. The fireplace literally had soot covering all of it and up to the ceiling. The reason for all these non-working lights became apparent at the point. He kept it dim for showings. There was a garage full of trash, a partial basement which we hadn't seen because that was where he had a big saw set up and it wasn't really a selling point for us. Mold. All the mold. So I called him up and basically said, "What the heck?" And he replied that money and keys had already exchanged hands and if I had a problem, I needed to put in a maintenance request. He said, "I don't remember it being that bad. Sounds like you made a mess moving in." Okay, so now I knew exactly how crappy of a person I'm dealing with. I put in a maintenance request about the mold, went out and bought all the bleach, other cleaning supplies, and carpet cleaner. I'm a military brat who lived in base housing. I know how to clean, and we got to work. It took 2 days of 4 adults, my ex, and a friend who came over to help to get this place passable. We even changed out the blinds. They were broken and dangerous. During this, my landlord comes over to look at the mold and, I kid you not, grabs a roll of my paper towels and my bleach spray and starts wiping the mold off the walls. He had just walked into the garage, grabbed some cleaning stuff that I had down in the garage, and I found him about halfway through his cleaning job. That's all he did. Fast forward 3 months. Time for an inspection. Okay, he tells me he'll be there tomorrow at 8 a.m. He shows up at 6:30 p.m., demands to be let in. I let him in, and he starts taking pictures of dishes in the sink. Dinner was still on the table, and then lecturing me about cleaning up when I cook. So in front of him, I pulled out my digital camera and took one of him taking a pic of the dishes for dinner with the dinner still on the table and a time date stamp. Jerk. He wanted to go through drawers in my bedroom. I just laughed at him. Didn't hear from him again until move-out time. If you thought that I was staying there longer than a year, then you're crazier than what I was when I rented that place. He sent me a move-out checklist, professional steam cleaning and white glove clean of the entire house, new pine straw for landscaping. All rooms needed to be repainted wheat. When we moved in, the bathroom was literally turquoise. So we got to work, steam cleaned, white glove clean, and so on, and then took another 1,000 pictures. He walks through and is ticked. He even had a white rag on top of the ceiling fan. He snatched the keys out of my hand and told me to expect to hear from him in 10 days about the deposit. That doesn't sound good. 2 weeks later, I get a bill for $3,750 for more professional steam cleaning, HVAC cleanout, and apparently we didn't use the right brand of wheat. Oh yes, we did. 2 things I haven't disclosed. I have a bad habit of recording bad people or just to cover my butt, and my mom is a landlord in the next state. She's the good kind who was never able to make money at it. If people told her they couldn't afford to pay her because they needed the money to feed their children, well, my mom usually gave them money. So glad she got out. But my mom was very familiar with the laws and had looked a few things up about my landlord. So I grabbed my little recorder and called him. He owns a real estate business. His side is rental stuff, and his wife's and grown daughters bought and sold houses. His oldest daughter picks up and transfers me to him. It gets ugly fast, and he tells me that I must have let my Australian Shepherd pee in the vent grates. What the heck? And that the way I take care of my daughter would be very interesting to CPS. He can help me work out a payment plan, but pretty soon we will be getting into collections territory. At one point, he actually says that, quote, all tenants are liars, end quote. Nice, about 20 minutes of being threatened. I call my mom back. To be honest, I'm pretty dang shook up. CPS for what? So my mom tells me to pretend like I'm playing along and ask for an itemized receipt. Tell him your mom is going to cover it and tell him your mom needs it before turning over the money. I had one 10 minutes after I asked, on my end. The professional steam cleaner was a friend of mine who had a business and gave me a discount. HVAC was a scam. The company he listed belonging to his brother-in-law was defunct and out of another state. Since I had before, after, and his new listing pictures, I knew he hadn't hired anyone to do HVAC cleaning. The vents were painted to the wall in all the pics. We saved our paint receipts, and I actually had pics of us painting. You can see the right brand and color, clear as day. I called his business and told his daughter that I would be taking them to court. She obviously was unaware of what crap her father was, because when I told her, no one threatens my little girl, she didn't know what I was talking about. So I put her on speakerphone and played a recording of her dad threatening to have CPS come visit if I didn't pay up, and she made it most of the way through before asking me to turn it off. And then she put me on hold to get her mom, his wife. She tried to reason with me, and I backed up the tape to the part to where he talks about what happens to kids in the foster system and played it. She told me they would get back to me, and they actually did. The mom and eldest called me on speakerphone and apologized. They told me how the business was divided and how they normally don't deal with rental stuff. I told them it was fine, but I was still taking them to court. Time for court. We ended up in arbitration. I showed up with 2 laptops for before and after, proof of his fake HVAC crap, a stack of literal receipts, him committing a crime by threatening to falsely call CPS, and a pretty good working knowledge of renter law in that state. At one point, the arbitrator asked me if I was a paralegal. He had a picture of dirty dishes and stories about how I lived like a pig. I pulled up the pic of the same sink of dishes with dinner in the foreground, time and date stamped. The arbitrator actually asked, did you expect her to do the dishes before she ate dinner? Even the woman taking notes for the arbitrator was grossed out when I showed them the ketchup and the basement mold pics. Did you know that you can get 3 times what you ask for in a rental dispute, depending on your state? Yeah, you can. I did. The arbitrator used the word appalling when describing the landlord's behavior. When I went out in the hallway afterwards, there was a young couple there asking the clerk if the landlord was available yet. Apparently, they were waiting for their turn at arbitration. I asked them if their case was HVAC related, and sure enough, it was. I pulled out all the paperwork I had about it and handed it to them with my number. I actually got several calls from his other tenants. He had been running that scam for a while, and these kids I had handed the paper to had looked up every house on the landlord's website and went door to door warning them. Smart, I hadn't thought of that. Meanwhile, my mother was filing a complaint with everyone she could think of because he had his business listed as a suite, which turned out to be a P.O. box. Huge no-no. Your business must be a location that can be served by the courts. A year later, I saw a truck with his logo drive past, but it wasn't the dually, it was an older F-150, so I looked him up in the county clerk's records. Well, first, it seems he got divorced and cleaned out. The house, the big truck, everything went to her. And then she sued him for the business. He got to keep the name, and she took everything else. I looked up the realty website using her maiden name to search. Her and the eldest daughter were using the maiden name and had a whole new webpage and setup. Also, my mom got notice that her complaint was being addressed, and he had his license suspended and a huge fine to get reinstated. My mom kept an eye on the records for home deeds in the area, and all but 2 of his properties were sold at auction. So, let's sum up. He had to pay me 3 times what I asked for, lost his big money-making scam, lost his wife, lost his houses, lost his truck, lost his license for a while. No regrets. HOA Karen demands what I do on my property, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss the crazy fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.